Tales from the couch, one game in the East. Boston hosting Philadelphia. I will do more on Lakers Warriors and some of the other series as well with Gilbert Arenas coming up. So don't feel left out. Anyway, great stat from TNT right at the start of the broadcast, and this is something that I always try to hammer on with everyone about every single playoff series and how games are connected. The result of the previous game influences the result of the next game. So the last 14 times the road team won game one, the home team won game two. I was like, wow, okay, let's talk about connected. All right, right from the jump, we know Embiid is coming back. MVP, Rolex. Has anyone ever seen anyone get a watch before? Based on last night's content, that must have been the first time for millions of people. All right, so Horford, immediately watching him, I'm like, okay, he's away from the rim, takes 2 threes in the first 240. Those were purposeful threes. You could see it with his decision-making. He didn't make any last night, by the way. I think he had one. But the point was, like, this was a proactive thing that he was going to do. I'm going to make Embiid have to respect me out here. I'm going to try to move him away from the rim. And that was obviously by design. I was curious of whether or not we would see the double bigs later on, the Rob Al Horford deal. We did see it. Again, this game was such a blowout that I don't know that there's a ton of stuff that I go, ooh, a little of this, little of that, little of that. So we're going to run through it all, obviously, but different things. I also feel like whenever something doesn't work, this is the mistake a lot of us make. We assume that you have to do something differently the next day. And as I've tried to remind, like I remember that Milwaukee-Atlanta series, certain things that were happening in drop coverage, although we do know the stubbornness of Milwaukee's approach in the past at times, but like it's not even specific to that series. There are certain times something will look like, well, you can't do that anymore, or you shouldn't play him there, or you can't have that be the defensive assignment. And then the next game, it's all the same, and the result is completely different. And that's why the coaches do not give in to this as much as maybe we would want them to, which is, again, another alarming thing about Phoenix, that throughout all of this, I feel like they've just gone, oh, well, maybe we'll just do this, or maybe we'll just do that. Like, adjustments are funny because we all want them, and then sometimes we get them, and we're like, But with this case with Embiid, you knew Boston was just going to play the game differently. Like, you have to play the game differently. So I thought Embiid looked pretty good overall. Defensively, he looked great. The block, the just influencing anything at the rim, you could tell immediately it was very different for Boston on some of the drives. Offensively, look, I don't think anybody that we would any of us that would respect an opinion out there, or anyone that's offering out opinions of people that we like, or even if you don't like them, you just think, okay, at least this person is somebody who makes sense generally. But Embiid not playing in game two because he did look rusty. He looked rusty offensively. I would not agree with wanting to do that if he's going to go ahead and be cleared. And we'll get to kind of his quote at the end of this whole thing. So, yeah, he look, when he's healthy and scoring like 40 and looking like the best player in the world, there's times where it looks like he's laboring. So that's just the way he's going to look at times. But now we had like a visual excuse with the knee bandage and everything and him being out. So it wasn't great. But there was a bunch of this that wasn't great for Philadelphia. So, another thing I was looking for is the free throw attempts, because it wasn't likely you were going to have another game match what happened in game one with no free throw attempts in the first half for Philadelphia. And Harden got a call at 7:23, and I was like, okay, here we go. There was also a play where Smart dove on PJ Tucker. It was so dirty by Smart. If you're a Philly fan, he obviously would get payback on diving for loose balls a little bit later. We will get to that play with Embiid. I just hate that play. I thought it was worse than the time Smart dove at Curry during the regular season of last year. You can sit there if you're a Celtics fan and be like, oh, I just love that grit, Tommy Point, hustle, and all that stuff. It's bullshit. It is, because you kind of know, especially as one of these elite athletes, you know what you're doing with your body. And then the way he hit PJ, I thought, like, PJ, we were going to have a leg amputation situation. So they were yelling on the broadcast, like, oh, PJ's down, and then it was away. So we didn't really get to see. And look, there are just certain players in the league now, as soon as they're dinged up at all physically, whether they're hurt and actually getting over it, or they're just, a little theatrical about it. And PJ's a very demonstrative player, but I just kind of hated that play. Anyway, Celtics double bigs at 6:48 of the first, so very early with that one. First quarter, let's run through the summary. Boston's up 28-22. They're +3 on field goal attempts. They're plus 6 points on threes. Both teams only one turnover, but Philly's in this by not making any shots because they're 9 of 10 from the free throw line. Grant Williams now a factor again, and it feels like a real bonus for Boston because even though rotationally I thought there was a chance for him to get in some of the games against Atlanta, you can see matchup-wise why, because I just don't know that his defense was as good this year as it was last year. I think you could see defensively, maybe Mazzulla not trusting it as much, his offense dipping a bit. But, man, if you watch Grant, and you're going to see him more in this series, when he has the Embiid assignment, he was absolutely busting his ass to fight for position and also just try to get into the way of any kind of entry pass. Not saying he's cutting off the entry pass, but influencing the angle. It was incredible stuff watching him fight. Like, tons of credit for him coming right in and going, I have no chance physically against Embiid. I have to just work him, and I have to, like, change sides to the ball and fight and fight and fight. Like, I'm not just going to sit behind him and let him get the catch. Not that Embiid's still not going to get the catch at times. And then on top of that, depending on who the primary ball handler was on some of the stuff where Embiid is set up at the free throw line, which we know is where he's going to live, you could have the defender on the ball cheat a little bit, not too much, especially if it's Harden, because you can't give Harden any space. Then you'd have on the other side, whoever was playing on the perimeter, cheating towards Embiid. So it was almost like this mini 3-man zone against Embiid, trying to influence the catch. And then once he made the catch, make it tougher for him. So I thought that's not an adjustment. That's what they're going to do. It's just the difference between Embiid being in the game and not being in the game, which should open up things from the outside, but it didn't happen because Philly didn't make any threes. One of my favorite misses now of the 2023 season is Jaylen Brown going in Embiid and trying to dunk on him. It was an all-time block from Embiid. But Jaylen having that mindset to do it, being like, all right, whatever, like I could miss it anyway. I thought that was just those are the things you want to see. You want to see those from your basketball players, from the guys that are going to have the ball in their hands at the biggest moment, showing absolutely no fear. Or, just the ego part of like, oh, this guy rejected my shit. All right, who cares? Like, would you rather just have a miss where you throw it way off the top of the glass to avoid the block, which we can see sometimes too, because it's like, I don't care if I miss this. I'm just going to throw it up there and see what happens. At 50-38, Sixers call a timeout with 4:41. After that timeout, as Mazzulla is mic'd up saying, let's win the quarter. Philly went on a 6-0 run. It's 50-44. Honestly, even though there was like 8-point stretches and the halftime score wasn't insurmountable, it's only 8 points. That 50-44 felt like the last time Philly really felt like a threat in the game. Halftime, as I said, 57-49. Boston is now plus 21 in threes. 8 of 22 versus 1 of 13 for Philadelphia from deep. This is usually not an indication that the Celtics are leading. Smart had the most field goal attempts with 13 at the half. I think Jaylen Brown had 12. And so you're wondering where this game is going to go. You're wondering where Tatum is. Tatum is having trouble with the fouls. We didn't get to see the replay on a charge, which I do think it was a charge. And then he ended up, I thought, picking up a third foul, but they gave it to Grant. He got his fourth foul later on by trying to chase Harden around a screen, and he reached, which, you shouldn't do because Harden's going to jump back into the arm. But on this play, Tatum actually just got his arm caught into Embiid, and then it's kind of like just got stuck and then hit Harden. So Tatum had just a brutal night. We'll get to his final numbers a little bit later. But the third quarter, as much as I felt like Boston was in control of the game, it's still only an 8-point game. Boston went bananas in the third. They won it 35-16. And that was pretty much the game. You had an ugly pickup game phase in the fourth, and then that was only replaced by even uglier, somebody's going to get hurt, last run of the day at the park, ugly pickup game phase. Although Rob W. still in at the 5-minute mark of the fourth. Don't quite get that one. Some criticism of Maxey today because of the loose ball stuff. And now this is the second time I've noticed this in this series, that when Doc says, hey, it's the loose balls, they're getting everything. That was part of it. I mean, the shooting's really not something you're going to be able to survive with. And we'll get to those final shooting numbers here in a bit. But if you notice the times where Maxey doesn't get a loose ball or is ball watching a bit, like, I just don't like how consistently NBA players will lose somebody in a box out. Like, you're just supposed to find somebody. Put your arm out there. But guys don't do it. Maxey's guilty of it because Maxey's waiting to get the outlet and go. So Maxey, who is such a problem in transition, Like it's helpless. And it's not like he's the biggest. He's so quick and you can see the defender backpedaling. There are times I feel like he drives 1-on-2 and he still has the advantage. That's how good he is at it. So I'd say to Philly fans, there's some clips certainly that look like he could have given you more effort, but I don't know that you get those fast breakouts from him because as soon as the ball is up, he is dialed in of trying to get out in the break and give you something in transition, which I think is a really important part of their offense because they're just easy points and you have a huge advantage of it. So this game's over. Tatum 1 of 7, 7 points. Each fan base can play the game of, well, hey, Boston's tied 1-1 here. They win this one big. They were clearly more dominant. Embiid looks rusty, and Tatum's not going to go 1 for 7 again, so this has to feel great. Okay, you could do that. But every box score has multiple examples of this being baked in where you would think, well, that's not going to happen again, where you want to keep all the positives and then think only the negatives will improve. Where Philly on the other side's going, wait, we shot it better than anybody from 3 all season long, 38.7% from distance, number 1 in the NBA, and they shot 6 of 30 last night. Boston was 20 of 51. So you could look at that and be like, hey, that's not going to happen again. And it's likely that wouldn't happen again. What's a little scary, though, if you're Philly, is 20 of 51, as good as that number is, man, were they wide open last night. These are wide open. Like, this could have been worse. Another probably not going to repeat itself. I'm not a big, when somebody doesn't play well in the playoffs and has an awesome game like Harden did, we gave him his credit, but the Flowers bullshit, don't quite get that. Harden 2 of 14, 0 of 6 from 3, 4 assists, 8 of 10 free throws. I track the Harden bullshit foul counter at my house. It's not an officially recognized stat. You won't see it anywhere else. I told myself, don't share. I'm going to share it. I had 5. Could be wrong. TNT's not showing replays of fouls. Like, is it 0? No. The number's not 0, but they're not showing them. It's very frustrating because sometimes I need to see these. And so then I have to rewind it, but I like that slow motion, different angle kind of thing. They did have the drone flying around, and that sucked. No one liked that very much. Maybe we're overreacting. So if you ask about the Harden part of this, you go, is there a real issue here of the 8 days off versus only 1 day off? I'd imagine for Harden at this stage. Yeah. But you know what? He's probably going to have another big game at some point because he is good enough to do it. It's just sustaining it and then what he will look like in a game 6 or a game 7 if this series goes that far, which, probably feels like it will, because you're going to get something better from Embiid. You'd think he's going to be better unless this injury is as bad as maybe he was hinting at afterwards. And again, I don't know. His quote was, the way we saw it with what I have, it's supposed to be out 4 to 6 weeks or something like that. So if you're a Boston fan, you're like, well, what are you talking about? He's hurt. He's not playing well. Russillo, you talk about Harden's playoff history all the time. So maybe game 1's a fluke, like Boston all the way. I don't know. Maybe. I've also watched this Boston team who I do think at times, like, this is what they're capable of, but I'm not in love with them. There was no dominant team this year. It's playing out that way in the playoffs. And for those that are newer listeners, okay, and shout out to a record-breaking episode, I think 6 weeks ago, 1.3 million listeners. For new listeners, if I had, in Robes and Tiva days, a stonemason write up my commandments, I would say, like, this is the most important thing you have to understand about playoff basketball. And I said it at the top because I thought it was a really interesting stat now with game 1 losers at home, now 15-0 in the last 15. Every game is connected. You cannot pretend you're down 0-1 when you're up 1-0. Right? Especially when the teams, there's not some massive gap between them. Yes, I think Boston's better. I thought we saw some stuff in the regular season. Sure, you could argue Tatum hits the game winner. If that doesn't go in, maybe the whole thing is split, the Embiid toss. You know what I mean? Like, I know we can all do these things all day. I do think Boston's better. Atlanta was alarming at times. So I wonder about the closing toughness. Maybe this is just their individual series of tests, and they'll be stronger for it. I would have thought that would have happened in the finals last year. whether letting Atlanta get back into some of those games where it felt like Boston was in control. It's like, how many times can you do that if you think you're actually going to be playing in the NBA Finals? This also for both fan bases as you watch Miami and New York, or who knows? Good luck with that one. I have no idea how Miami was still competitive, although the lack of a on-ball creator late, like an elite guy, the guys we all freak out about, the guys we always want to trade for, or the guys that always demand the trades. The reason why we talk and spend so much time on those dudes is because they are so incredibly important in these games, the last 2 or 3 minutes when everything is kind of breaking down. And when the Heat all of a sudden didn't have one, that I thought was the difference in game 2 was New York evens that series. But if you're a Philly fan or you're a Boston fan, you're probably looking at a series going, this second round matchup kind of feels like the Eastern Conference Finals. Dismissive, yes. Honest, also yes. So back to my tenet here of everything being connected. We fall for it all the time. We see the game 1 results, the only result we have to look at, and we go, all right, wait, what's going on here? Are all these? No, these things are not going to happen because you can't fake being desperate. The reason why if 2 teams are matched and it's 0-2, there's no way, despite all the pregame routine and all the mic'd up coaching stuff and all the timeouts, all the cliche shit that is said over and over and over again, if the other team that's down 0-2 is like close to you in ability and talent, they're just going to play harder unless they have no soul whatsoever. And there's all sorts of things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. So to see this series evened up, look, if it went the other way, right? What if Boston held on to game 1, Philly comes back, they're more energized, they're more desperate. This series is 1-1 going back. It's the same 1-1 finality of the 2 games in Boston, but it's probably just more of a bummer today if you're in Philadelphia. But if you were down 0-2, you probably get game 3 in Philly, looking at how this Boston team doesn't really seem to have that ultimate killer instinct that you'd want. And maybe, we overrate or assume every team that wins an NBA title has that thing. So again, all games are connected. Last thought here on Embiid, because he didn't look great on offense last night, an alarming play too, the third quarter where he got Smart back for diving at PJ Tucker where he just flattened him. That's the play with Embiid that drives me fucking crazy. He's got Smart on him, and Smart's probably better against post players than he is some of the quickest guards, although nobody's great against the quickest guards in the league. So Smart actually has the Embiid assignment. He's fighting with him. Embiid gets it down to just be on the right block. And Embiid has to realize at that point, like Horford's kind of roaming a bit, depending on, who he's defending and who the sub pattern or what the sub patterns are for Philadelphia. And Embiid turns baseline as if did you really think you were going to have a clear look at it? I don't get why he seems, because he actually can be a really good passer. And I know he had that bad turnover on that pass. I mean, he forced it, whatever, not a big deal. That's one of the things when you don't play. I think he was gone for 12 days. Stupid stuff like that will happen when you don't play for a while. But he turned into Horford. And those are the moments where I'm like, how can you not, did you think no one was going to be coming over to help defend on you, especially when Horford's been kind of helping a little bit anyway. So he crunched Smart, whatever. That wasn't the game. The game was a million missed threes, Boston going crazy, having a good defensive approach to Embiid, and Embiid looking a little rusty. I would not have, if you tell me, hey, they shouldn't have even played Embiid, give him the extra couple days, I disagree, because you also never know what's going to happen. Like some of the thoughts on punting on individual playoff games to be ready for the next playoff game, you only have 7 of these. You have weird shit happens. So I would never, if my guy is cleared and yes, going to be a little hurt, I go, let's get him out there and see if you can't take 2 of these in Boston, then go back to Philadelphia. That's not what happened, but I have no issue with it coming back and playing.